From one end of the world to another, nations, communities, and organizations are now ruled by individuals who know very little about the world or even about the people who occupy these spaces that they lord over. No continent is spared the ignominy of this disheartening development. This has become a world of brilliant people ruled by dunces. This is now the story of our world, and it is bad. In much of the world, brute force and the ability to deceive, rather than intellectual skills and decency, have taken over as the characteristics that define or should define who emerge as leaders and how societies should be structured and run. Therefore, people are embraced as leaders, not because they have any leadership skills, but because they are either masters of deceit, who have learned how to lie their way into people's hearts, or they have the brute power to attain submission to themselves. Time was when brilliance was celebrated and rewarded. That was when, because of his brilliance, Albert Einstein was accepted, heard, and is still celebrated, indeed, actually, with incredible references to his accomplishments in academia and in healthcare institutions, some named after him in the United States and other countries. Mahatma Gandhi used his brilliance to lead India to independence and to generate movements for civil rights around the world. Dr. Martin Luther King and many other leaders before and after him used their brilliance to advance the cause of history, their occupations and our professions notwithstanding. Most of us can identify at least one such person in our communities, our countries of origin, or the countries, societies where we live. People who used their brilliance to do really great things that advanced the cause of human history. We know individuals who responded to the silent call of responsibility and used their brilliance to positively impact the direction of human events. Although many like me would argue that we no longer embrace and celebrate brilliance as much as we used to, it is also true that every now and again we experience sparks of brilliance that remind us of what our engaged brains are capable of. We still have brilliant people making incredible discoveries in their daily lives, such as Dr. Bennett Omalu, the Nigerian-born US-based neuropathologist who discovered what is now widely known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, in the brains of dead American football players. That discovery has forever changed the perception and administration of American football. Despite the sparks of brilliance about which I speak, however, it is also my contention that our world has regressed intellectually because, in most aspects of life, it now appears that we are engaged in a shameless race to the bottom. It has become very difficult, indeed, to recall that time when children were desperate to be friends with their brilliant peers, or the time when parents wanted their children to date and marry only brilliant boys and girls. Now, schools are filled with children who do not wish to be identified as brilliant for fear that they will not be accepted into the hip social groups. And society is replete with parents who want their children to only marry wealthy people, notwithstanding how the wealth was acquired and or the credibility of the suitor. So, look at the world in which we now live. Dunces are celebrated even as their ascendancy to power and their display of authority either dumb down the intellectual abilities of others around them or make it difficult and or dangerous for people who for those others actually to speak truth to power. In some cases, otherwise brilliant people succumb to the lure of material because the exercise of brilliance has been reduced to the glow and acknowledgement of prestige based on wealth. No wonder our world is in so much trouble. It takes more than power and authority to create and maintain a just society, which is what we need in our world today. It also takes the ability to understand both the consequences of injustice and the advantages of having a socially just society. In other words, it takes brilliance as well. It takes brilliance to recognize, support, and promote the values of a just society because it actually takes some brilliance to understand what individuals and groups need in a society and how to get it for them. It takes more than determination to develop an original idea in a world that's saturated by information that can be used effectively for good or bad. In my opinion, it takes brilliance to conceive of and act on an idea that benefits others beyond the confines of one's nepotistic system. In political and religious circles in our world today, people are ridiculed for their brilliance. In the United States, for example, it is now the norm for members of a certain political party to refer to their opponents as, quote, elitists, implying that the brilliance of their opponents makes them, quote, different, that is, different from the people that they aspire to lead. But really, shouldn't the electorate aspire and be proud to be led by brilliant people? One would expect so, except that the politicians who pride themselves in being dunces actually do win a lot of votes, and in many cases, the election. In too many of today's churches, pastors condemn the brilliant as worldly humanists that their followers must shun, as if there is something wrong with the very essence of humanism, which advocates human action and critical thinking over dogma and superstition. But why? Why should any people adopt a line that casts them as having more in common with a dullard? Why don't communities of thinking human beings rise against people who want to dumb them down? To what extent, can or should people expect a dunce to lead them to glory? One does not even need to go far back in history to see what can happen when a person is placed in position who is not brilliant and does not seek knowledge to gain intellectual strength. We know even from contemporary experience that intellectually weak people can only bring down the nations, communities, organizations, or departments that they lead. In the absence of high intellectual skills and an unwillingness to learn, those leaders resort to tactics intended to legitimize and empower them as bosses rather than as leaders. Lying, bullying, and arrogance at the top of any organization or nation can only hold the respect of the led for so long before the incompetence of the leadership is exposed, along with cracks in the system that they were supposed to be guarding. Brilliance is a good thing. The alternative is dangerous for any society. Brilliance should neither be punished nor discouraged, nor should it be contained or ignored. We should all strive to be brilliant, and we must recognize that ideas that come out of a brilliant mind do not sink ships, but instead they build edifices that stand the test of time. On the contrary, the loose talk and uncultured actions of an unintelligent person, especially one in a position of authority, may do even more than sink ships. Our world needs to stand up and be counted because the proven ability of brilliance to shine strong, bright, guiding lights in all corners of a fading, sleepy world is needed now more than ever. It is time once again to embrace and celebrate brilliance if we intend for our current societies and we to make a strong march into history.